Thanks so much for joining us today on Uncork PA. I'm your host, Missy Wilson. I'm second generation winery owner at Cedar Ridge Vineyards, located just outside of Kutztown, and I'm happy to have been part of the Pennsylvania wine scene for almost 20 years now. So join me as we talk vineyards, wineries, wine, and the people that make up the great Pennsylvania wine industry. We're still in October, so that means we're still celebrating Pennsylvania Wine Month. Looking to celebrate and haven't started yet? I'll give you a few great suggestions for how to enjoy your favorite Pennsylvania wines or try some new ones. And with it being October, most wineries across the state are actually starting to finish up their harvest season. The last of the grapes in the vineyard tend to be those bigger, fuller, heavy reds, unless wineries are looking to make some late harvest or some ice wines. But just because the season's almost over and the vineyards are almost picked through doesn't mean that there still aren't some challenges. This year has been especially difficult for vineyard owners with birds and other pests. And many of those pests are disrupting the vineyards are actually invasive species, which means that they've come from other countries and don't currently have any natural occurring enemies here. So this can lead to some creative ways to try to control the population. We'll be talking with my father, Rich Blair of Cedar Ridge Vineyards, to learn a little bit more about some of the invasive species that are in the vineyards right now and how vineyard owners try to control these pests to keep their vineyards, the vines, and the grapes as healthy as possible. So we're halfway through October, which hopefully means that you guys have been celebrating Pennsylvania Wine Month over the past couple weeks. If you haven't enjoyed a Pennsylvania wine yet and you're interested in enjoying some, I have a few great suggestions for where you can grab a few bottles and how you can enjoy with friends and family, both at home or out at wineries and restaurants. So if you're looking to try something new, but you don't want to spend the time to go to a winery quite yet, both the Pennsylvania State Store system as well as many grocery stores actually carry a variety of Pennsylvania wines now. So in the state stores, you can actually they have a special section called the Made in PA section that carries local wines as well as spirits. So many of them have that section on a specific area in the wall that you can head over to, and they should have a great selection of Pennsylvania wines to choose from. And in the grocery stores nowadays, a lot of Pennsylvania wines can be found on the shelves if your grocery store is carrying wine and beer. A lot of times they'll have an end cap feature where a single winery might have several types of varieties of wines to choose from, or it might be along the shelves for you to pick and choose. No matter what types of wines you're into, you should be able to find a wine that fits your type of favorite in either of these two sections. And it's a perfect time to just pick up that bottle of wine made in Pennsylvania instead of going to your normal place and picking that bottle up off the shelf that you typically go to. If you're ready to plan that fun weekend with family and friends, October is a great time to plan that Pennsylvania wine trip. With almost 300 wineries throughout the state, you can pull together a fun itinerary using the Pennsylvania Winery Association's website at pennsylvaniawine.com. You can find several wineries near you that you would like to visit, and then the website will actually pull the directions for you together. A few things to note: depending on the distance between wineries, I would suggest usually doing a maximum about 4 wineries for each day that you're planning on doing a visit. Even though you can get through a tasting fairly quickly if you want to, many times you're looking to spend that nice, fun, relaxing time enjoying the wines, the space, and your friends. So I recommend leaving at least 45 minutes to an hour at each location. Definitely don't forget to add the food into the mix. Some wineries have restaurants, others have food trucks, and many carry snacks. However, some don't have food options at all. You'll definitely want to keep some snacks in the car and plan a lunch, whether it's fast food along the way or a sit-down meal. Also, make sure you double check the winery's hours. Many wineries also stop serving wine either 15 minutes to a half hour before closing. So you'll want to definitely, as you plan your trip, take into account those things. If you want to experience Pennsylvania wines without all the travel, plan a wine tasting party instead. So invite several of your friends and family over and have them each bring their favorite bottle or two of Pennsylvania wine. Have out some appetizers. Pennsylvania also makes amazing cheeses, soft pretzels, chocolates, and so many more. Or you can plan a potluck. It's a great way of enjoying the bounty that Pennsylvania has to offer while staying in. Many restaurants and wine bars, especially those in more urban areas, are also celebrating Pennsylvania Wine Month, with select Pennsylvania wines available either by the glass or by the bottle. Check to see if any of your favorites are celebrating with us, then head over, enjoy a great meal, and pick up a glass of either your favorite or try something new. So whether you decide to stay in or venture out, October is the most perfect month as Pennsylvania Wine Month to enjoy the great variety of Pennsylvania wines that the state has to offer. So while you're out visiting wineries this month, it's a beautiful time to experience the vineyards as well. As you start traveling throughout the state right now, it's amazing. It's gorgeous. The leaves are all changing on the trees and you have beautiful foliage. Well, the same thing actually happens in the vineyards as well. So you'll start to see that beautiful color change on the vines too. Many vineyards are also down to the last of their grapes hanging. So those are typically tend to be those deep purple or black grapes as we're down to those heavy red varietals. It makes for amazing fall pictures. However, with the last of the grapes hanging, vineyard owners and managers are still trying to keep those grapes as safe as possible before they're harvested. Obviously, weather is always a big concern, and you can't control excess rain or early frosts. But there are a lot of other concerns in the vineyard, including pests, that weigh on the vineyard owners' minds. So today, I'm happy to have my father, Rich Blair of Cedar Ridge Vineyards, on the program, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the pests in the vineyard, but more specifically, invasive species. So, Dad, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so let's just start with a little bit of a background. How long have you been growing grapes for, and how did you get your start, and how much do you have under acres do you have under vine right now?
So I got started in 1998, which was a century ago, and it was something I wanted to do for a long time, but I finally had the time to plant grapes. So we planted Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot Gris on our first vineyard site, and it's been a roller coaster ride ever since. So.
Okay, so how many? So our the first vineyard planted in '98. You've kind of been playing with the varietal since then. How many acres are you currently are we producing or under vines right now?
So currently we have about 25 producing acres, and we have another 3 acres that will be producing next year. So we're about 28 acres at this point.
So you've been doing this a long time now, and this time of year we're down to the last of the harvest. So there's just a couple more varietals left in the field. We've got some Cab Franc, a little bit of Petit Verdot, and some Tannat hanging right now. We've had some conversations in the past, and you've been talking to several other vineyards too. This year, a lot of vineyards have been hit really hard with starlings. So, can you tell us a little bit about what starlings are and how does them being present kind of change what you're doing in the vineyard, especially this time of year?
So sometimes, this time of year vineyards aren't stressful because everything works well. Then sometimes they're very stressful, and this is one of those very stressful years when the starlings, which that one is a pretty one right there, up on the screen, become a pest. And this year has been extremely tough on us with the starlings. They started in late August, and there are flocks of upwards of 1,000 of them that are coming over the vineyards, and then not just going to our vineyards. They're going, yeah, that looks like a picture of our vineyard right there. They've been going to other vineyards in the area, and so we chase them out of our vineyard, and they end up at Stony Run or Weathered Vineyards or Vinecrest, and they come back to us again. So they are a pain, to be nice about it. They are very destructive. We lost probably 10 to 12 tons of fruit already this year, which is about 15 or 20% of our crop to the birds. So it is a economic situation where controlling birds is very important.
So, starlings are an invasive species, which is a little bit different than the other birds that kind of hang around.
Yeah.
What does an invasive species mean?
So Starlings came from Europe, probably 300 or 400 years ago on a boat, um, and they came here and they have no natural enemies. So invasive species means they came from somewhere else. And so on the show, we'll talk about a lot of invasive species coming from Europe and Asia, but it goes both ways. We sent a famous invasive species to Europe in the 1800s, so maybe turnabout's fair play. But yeah, invasive species usually don't have a natural predator, and so they multiply exponentially. And the only thing that limits their population is probably the health of the flock or the herd or the population itself.
Okay, so starlings are a little bit different, where controlling them is not as easy as it is controlling, say, an invasive plant or an invasive bug. It's not like you can just spray and then they all disappear. So, what are some of the things that winery owners do? Some that we might do on site, but some that other wineries do as well to kind of try to control and limit the damage done by starlings as much as possible.
So over the last 25 years, we've done a lot of things to try to control the birds. Netting was the first thing that we went to, and we went to over-the-row netting, which meant you had to put a white net from top to bottom of the row, and then take it off in the late fall. We then moved to side netting, which meant we could just leave the nets tied to the side of the vineyard, save us a lot of labor, and was easy to apply and easy to put back up again. We also went to bird calls, distressed bird calls, which a lot of times if your listeners go to vineyards, you'll hear these birds squawking in the background. You may not know what it is, but it's a distressed bird call. And then there's also cannons, which are liquid propane cannons that make these loud bangs that go out through the vineyard and scare the birds away. They're all good, they're all effective, but the birds learn to live with all of them, and figure out how to circumvent whatever you do. It takes them a little while, but they do it. And so some situations like we try to be nice to our neighbors and don't use the bird squawks and the cannons. We did that for a while. But good fences make good neighbors, and we like to keep them as good neighbors. So basically, we're down to a couple shotgun blasts every now and then, and side netting. And then we figured out a couple years ago that we have these dancing men in the vineyard, which are the same men that you see outside of car dealerships that wave and tell you to come on in. Well, the birds see them and say they want to get away. And so that's very effective. But again, the birds get used to it after a couple of weeks. So you have to rotate what you're doing to different places.
Perfect. So, with the birds and this time of year and how much pressure is going on, has that changed what you've decided to do with regards to picking at all? I know a lot of vineyards kind of have been in the same situation where you have to make that decision when it's best to pick. Do birds play into this at all?
Birds are playing into it as we speak now because we're planning on picking tomorrow for some of our Tannat and Petit Verdot because they're not quite ready yet, but the birds think they're ready enough. And if we leave it go for another 3 or 4 days, we won't have anything to pick. So yeah, birds they're dictating the harvest parameters at this point.
Yeah, so across the board, pretty much in a lot of Pennsylvania, the starlings have been an issue during harvest season. But if we go backwards in time and we go through the growing season as well, there's actually other invasive species that we have in the vineyard that affect the actual growing season. So the ones that people know a lot about, obviously spotted lanternflies have been for years now a main source of topic and conversation in the news that a lot of people have kind of learned about this pretty bug that is a dangerous bug, but you also have Japanese beetles too, which are very familiar. So the starlings are actually eating just the fruit. So you're losing your fruit to the birds. How do the lanternflies and the Japanese beetles affect the vines differently, and are they a concern every year?
Yeah. So right now, Japanese beetles have been around since the 1950s that I know of, and they've been here every year. So they're pretty much predictable. They come out in late June to early July for about a 2 week period. They will eat the leaves of the vines, and when they eat the leaves of the vines, it means there's no carbohydrates getting into the root system or the grapes, and so they can be very destructive. However, we have learned that 1 or 2 applications of insecticide at the right time will kill 95% of the Japanese beetles on your plant, and that you don't have to worry about them too much. So Japanese beetles are very controllable if you're proactive in what you do to eliminate them.
Now,
Same thing.
does a damage to the Japanese beetles, is that just like a one season thing? So like if they're eating the leaves, it's not going to affect, like the vine might go dormant for the one season, but is it going to be like permanent damage to the vine at all?
It can be permanent if you don't spray for them, because they will eat all the leaves, and then the secondary leaves will come out later. But you lose large period of time where there's no exchange of carbohydrates in the vine, and then the vines can get weak over the winter time. So it is best to control them when you get a chance to.
Perfect. So then the Japanese beetles go after the leaves. What do the lanternflies do to the vineyard?
So the lanternflies vector another section of the vine, and that's the sap that comes from the natural progression of the sap rising in and out of the vine. So they're basically sap suckers. They sit on the vine, they suck the sap out, and then they excrete their excretions, which is called sooty mold, all over the plant, and that can set up mold problems. But basically, what they do is they weaken the vine by being on the vine, sucking out the juices of the vine, and then leaving the vine unable to survive a cold winter if we have a cold winter, because there's not enough nutrients left in the vine. So again, it has taken us a while to learn how to control these guys, but it's very controllable with insecticides again, and that's probably the only control you have at this point with the spotted lanternfly.
So animals aren't the only invasive species that kind of happen and affect the vines. There's plants that have come over as well into the United States, and one of them, which has gotten a lot of recognition recently, is the tree of heaven, which is also called the Atlantis tree. With it being a plant, how is this different, and how does this affect the vineyard compared to things like the lanternfly and the starlings and the Japanese beetles, which are animals?
So the Atlantis tree really has no effect in the vineyard by itself, but it's a vector for the spotted lanternfly. So it's part of their life cycle that they have to be there to finish up the life cycle, or maybe there's another host out there that can do it for them, but they're very important in the life cycle of the spotted lanternfly. It's kind of amazing that the Atlantis tree came here 400 years before the spotted lanternfly did. So it was like they were just waiting for somebody to help them out, you know?
Yeah, so basically, if you kind of eliminate some of the tree of heaven, you can minimize the effects of the lanternflies in the nearby like vineyards and fruiting orchards and things like that. Is the thought process?
It's a thought, and that if you bait a Atlantis tree, that you're actually baiting the spotted lanternflies, so that when they feed on the Atlantis tree, they will die. And it's a very good thing to have happen, because we don't like them. But there's a whole bunch of other, weeds and other noxious herbs that grow in the vineyard that are also from Eurasia, and they're invasive. So there's a whole life cycle that you have to adapt to, and it's all about killing things with herbicides or insecticides or fungicides. And it would have been so much easier not to have to use all these products.
So, as you had kind of alluded to earlier, with regards to the vineyards, one of the first problems with an invasive species actually wasn't something from Europe or Asia coming over here. We actually caused the vineyards from the U.S. caused some issues with vines in Europe. So, what exactly happened there?
So So the American vines are used to American soils and American pests, and so they adapted to what happens in a vineyard here. So sometime in the 1800s, some of the grapes that we were growing here, some French people wanted to bring back to France to propagate them there. So what they unknowingly did was bring back a root louse named Phylloxera back to France, and because the vinifera grapevines in France had no exposure to the root louse, as soon as the vines were planted, the phylloxera started to move through the soils, and it actually infected almost all the vineyards in Europe and killed them. And so it was our gift to France, I guess, and Europe. But the only way that the French vineyards actually survived was they came back to the United States and got the rootstock from our native varieties that were indifferent to the phylloxera, and grafted them on their vinifera grapevines, and so their vines now have survived because of what we gave them back to make up for ruining the vineyards in the first place.
Perfect. So, basically, between weather, birds, bugs, invasive species, grapes just aren't the most easy crop to grow. It's not similar to growing things like corn and soybean, which is very common in Pennsylvania. Each vine we touch multiple times throughout the season, and a lot of hard work is put in. And you're just causing the trying to create the best grapes possible for harvest season because your wines are actually made in the vineyard. So we really appreciate you coming out and talking to us today about some of the things that you have to deal with on an everyday basis in the vineyard to make sure that the vines stay healthy on an everyday basis, which continues to let them go and move into the next harvest season.
Right.
So thanks so much for joining us today and letting us know a little bit more about those challenges. And it's also a great time to get into the vineyard right now, as long as the birds aren't around, because the vineyard is absolutely gorgeous. Most of the grapes are off, but you're starting to get that beautiful color change that you see throughout the trees are coming through the vineyard too. So I highly suggest stopping by one of your local wineries that have a vineyard to really enjoy the beauty of this time of year. If you want to stop up at Cedar Ridge Vineyards, they're open Tuesday through Thursday from 11 to 5. Thursday through Tuesday, 11 to 5, closed on Wednesdays. And you can check out additional information at cedarridgevineyards.com. So throughout the rest of this month, don't forget it is Pennsylvania Wine Month. So enjoy wines from your favorite wineries or try a few new ones. Whether you enjoy reds or whites, rosés and sparklings, sweet wines to dry wines, or something in between, there is definitely a wine for you. If you're looking to try that new winery, check out the Pennsylvania Wineries Association's website at pennsylvaniawine.com. They have a list of all the wineries throughout the states, plus there's links to their website so you can find a little bit more about the wines that they produce, the hours that they're open, and various events that they might have going on. It's a great resource when trying to plan your next outing. And when stopping by the wineries, make sure you enjoy a stroll through the vineyards as make sure you ask permission before you do, but make sure, remember all that hard work that goes into that vineyard. Wines are made in the vineyard. So the dedication and the many hours that are put into making sure that each vine and each grape is at its best by protecting it as best as possible from the weather and the pests and various invasive species. Make sure you join us. Our next podcast is super exciting because we're finally talking about the Pennsylvania Somm Judgment. We're going to announce the winners and the wineries that have made their way into the top in 2022. The great part is that all of these wines are released currently in the tasting rooms and available to purchase. So it's not like you're going to be having to wait a year or two and remember which wines to buy. These are currently released wines in the various tasting rooms throughout the state. If you can't wait for the next podcast, don't worry. The winners have actually already been announced. So head over to thepennsylvaniawine.com or go to our Facebook page or Instagram page to see the results, including the best in the state, the top 10 wines, plus the honorable mentions as well. And don't forget to listen to Uncorked PA live the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month, starting at noon on Facebook and YouTube. And if you can't join us live, you can always watch programs at any point in time when the most convenient for you. Plus, you can listen to Uncorked PA on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite place to stream your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to the station so you know when new episodes are posted. And we want to thank the Pennsylvania Wine Association for supporting this program with grant money from the PLCB. And we look forward to sharing more hidden gems of the Pennsylvania wine world with you next time. Have a great day.